Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you find this presentation as useful as Laura's presentation. Laura is an excellent resource within SEK, and she also works with numerous clients and consults on their HR questions and needs. So I'm Bill Oyster. I've been a member of the firm here for a year and a half, joined SEK in 2017. I have over 20 years of experience. And an interesting fact about me is I'm an avid bear hunter, and the largest bear I've ever shot was 431 pounds. So that's my trophy. With me is Taylor Rote. She's an audit supervisor. Excellent addition to the governmental auditing team, a real expert in what she does and a great asset to SEK. The interesting fact about Taylor is that she's an avid squirrel hunter, and you have to ask her sometime about her stuffed squirrel collection. Okay, that's not true, but I just had to throw in something there for her. Just a little bit about SEK. We have a dedicated team of auditors and consultants within the governmental niche and have over 50 years of experience and work largely with all kinds of sizes of governmental clients. Just wanted to briefly go over our agenda today. We're going to be talking about the quick access toolbar, some data cleanup tips, how to flatten files, and we'll talk about what that means to flatten a file in Excel, the text-to-column functionality, filtering data, and just some of the unique things within that functionality within Excel, pivot tables, and then some other useful tools and functions. So hopefully you're not in this situation where you lied on your resume about being proficient in Microsoft Excel, but if you are, hopefully we'll get you some of that knowledge here today. Okay, first we're going to talk about the quick access toolbar. So this is just a feature within all Microsoft Office products, but here we're going to focus on Excel since that's what the presentation's on today. And it's just a way to collect your favorite shortcuts in one area. So you can see from this slide, the quick access toolbar is down below the ribbon here. And this really just has, all the shortcuts that I use pretty much on a daily basis within Excel. And it's just a way to kind of have quick access to them all. So we're going to go through just kind of how to set that up within Excel. If you go under the File menu and Excel Options, there's an area for the quick access toolbar here. Once you're in there, you can choose to filter what's displayed here by different things. Here we have popular commands, just commands that people use a lot within Excel. You can also filter that by the different ribbons within Excel. If you know where the command is, it's easier then to find. Or if you're not sure what ribbon it's in and you can't find it in the popular commands, they have an all commands option that will show everything that's available to put on your quick access toolbar sorted alphabetically. So then once you find that shortcut that you want to add, basically just have to click on it in this section here and then go to the add button, click that, and it will put it over here, which is the list of your shortcuts that you have on your quick access toolbar. Now, typically it will put it at the bottom or wherever your cursor is within that, but you can always move that and group that accordingly within this area here. So up or down within there. So I always like to group mine in categories. All the save functions are together, some formatting things are together, so that they're easier to find. Now, when I showed you my screenshot of the quick access toolbar, mine was shown below the ribbon. Excel defaults at above the file menu. And when you first set up Microsoft Excel, you'll see that they have basically three shortcuts there, I think: save, redo, and undo. or 3 that show up on the quick access toolbar as a default. So you can have it either place, but I prefer mine under the ribbon, so I check that box. And then lastly, you can, once you have this set up, you can export these settings and they'll save as a file that you can share with others, or even if you want to put it on your home computer, you can email it home and import it into your Excel there. So that can be shared easily once it's customized. So, within that, we've kind of talked about how to sort and display the quick access toolbar, but also, the sharing as well. So next, I kind of want to go through some data cleanup tips. And with that, we often talk about wanting to have your file be a flat file within Excel. And we'll kind of go through that concept here, but really it's not having the breaks within the rows or columns and having empty rows within your main data set to really make it able to work properly with the different functions like that we'll be talking about later with filtering and the pivot tables and things of that nature. It needs to be in a flat file before those functionalities will work. So, this is just an example of a file. This is a QuickBooks general ledger detail. Even if you don't use QuickBooks, this is a helpful example of just how, sometimes a file you get isn't going to be in a useful format. And before you can do much with that file, you have to clean up that file to make it be able to be filtered and run pivot tables and et cetera on that. So just to start, I know with Excel or with QuickBooks, they don't put the account number in one column. So currently, the account numbers are in columns B, C, and D within this workbook. So that's one of the things that we'll do first is really get all that data into one column. So when you have that situation, and in this instance, there's data to the right, I recommend copying those columns that you want to combine into one column into a separate tab into Excel. Because as we're going to delete and move things over, we don't want that to affect the data to the right of that. So we don't want that to move along with it. So we're going to move it over to another tab, do what we need to do with it, and then bring it back. So first of all, we're going to look at how to select some blank lines within here. So within your home menu, there's a find and select, and in there is a go to special button or option within that tab. And then within that, once you hit that go to special, this separate box pops up that will give you many different options on what you want to do then. And one of the options is select all the blank cells within your selection. So in this instance, we'll highlight, our column B down through the end of our population, go in here, then select any of the blanks within that. And once we have that into the separate tab, then we can go back and delete out those blanks to move everything that would be in column C over into column B. So here's the kind of the example or screenshot of that. Here we have those accounts into a separate tab. We selected the B, we went to the go special and blanks. It selected everything that was blank, and then we just right mouse click and delete, and the window pops up and we can just shift left. So really that's, a process now. When I started out, I said, well, we have information in 3 columns. I knew that going into that, but once we did it once, if we want to check to see whether there's still information that we need to move over, we can highlight that column C. You can see there's still 4 accounts that aren't in column B yet that are still remaining in column C. So we're just going to have to repeat that process one more time until there's nothing left and everything is in column B. So once we do that, the next step is we want to take and we want to copy the information down. So we're going to select again our blank cells within that column A once we have everything in that column. And then we're going to add a formula in there and then fill down by doing a control enter. So here's a kind of the screenshot. Everything's in column B. We're going to add our formula. We want our formula, once we have our every blank cell selected, is plus the cell before it. So once we hit that control enter, what that does is it's going to copy that same formula into every cell that's selected. So we don't have to worry about copying and pasting everything into each unique cell then. So that's just a quicker way of coming up with the same result. So once we do that, we're going to copy and paste values over that. We don't want that to be a formula. We want it to be a static account number. And then we're going to move that information back to our original sheet. So here we're going to dump, we didn't have anything in column A. We're going to dump everything into column A. And then we can go ahead and delete the remaining cells B through D that we had the original information in. So we'll go through, we'll clean up, there's some empty columns within that spreadsheet as well. We can delete them out. And then we're going to really go ahead and delete any of the blank rows. We're going to, again, highlight a column. So in this instance, we're going to choose the date column because we know that every single transaction that we want within our general ledger detail has a date associated with it. So any empty date rows or unnecessary rows to clean up our data and flatten it out. So we're going to select that column C, go to find special and blanks, and then we're going to I use on my quick access toolbar the delete row button, and it gets rid of all those blank rows. So once we do that, we can kind of format anything else that we want within there. Here in this example, I'm going to add an amounts column so I can get my debits minus credits into like the same column J here. That will then come down to 0, for all the activity. And then if I want to copy that down through, I can just double click on this little square in the bottom right-hand corner of the cell. And because at this point, my file is flat, that will automatically copy that formula all the way down to the bottom of my table. So once I do that, I'm going to copy and paste information over top of that. And then I'm able to filter the information here. So I'm not going to go into the filtering and those properties because we're going to hit on that later in the presentation. So my family are huge Harry Potter fans, and my son took 2 books somewhere with him this week just to read while we were gone for half a day. And if you've ever seen a Harry Potter book, I'm not sure why he needed to, but he is a very quick reader. So next we're going to talk about flat files. We kind of hinted on this, but really, they really are beneficial to really do what Excel is meant to do. So it is really important that the formatting of your files is proper and you get things cleaned up, especially when you're dumping them out of a system. They don't tend to come over clean. And sometimes even when you're setting them up, just thinking about what the functionality within Excel is meant to do. So if you have an option to put in blank columns, maybe skip that if you actually want to go ahead and try to have some of the more advanced functionality within that workbook. So we're going to turn over the presentation here for a little bit to Taylor, who's going to start talking with text to columns.
All right, thank you, Bill. Like you mentioned, my name is Taylor Rote, and I'm a supervisor in the audit department here. And I'll be going over a few different features that I find beneficial in Excel, with the first one being text to column here. So this is definitely one of the features in Excel that I use the most to format data as an auditor, but would also be beneficial really for anyone who runs financial reports and exports this information into Excel on a regular basis. So depending on the software systems your organization uses for your accounting records or your reporting needs, the reports you run may not always export into an Excel file directly, but may come through as a text or a CSV file. So often with this, when you then try to export from those file types to Excel, the data will pull in one line and one cell as shown here within the slide. So if this happens to you a lot, which it probably does because I know it happens to me fairly often, you'll definitely want to become an expert in this text to column function in Excel. So luckily, it is a pretty easy feature, and I'll go through an example kind of how text to column works. So you'll see within, and as I mentioned earlier, that the data, although pulled in on separate rows, it's all here within this same column, which in this example, that's column A. So the information being pulled in our example, it's an employee list, and it has their name, social security number, and then address. So the point of this feature then would be to break out each of these different attributes into their own separate column. That way that information can be easily filtered and analyzed, which you'll see more of what I mean there when we go over the filtering data in the next section. So to do this in Excel, we've kind of screenshotted here and circled the steps within your toolbar. So you'll start by selecting the data tab from your initial home screen. And then once on that tab, there's an option under the data tools section for the text to column function. Prior to selecting that, you will just need to make sure that the data you want to separate is highlighted. So, which in our example can be done so by just highlighting all of column A there. So once that data is highlighted and the text to column is selected, the first step of what I'll say the conversion tool will pop up and give you the option to choose the file type that best describes your data. So you'll see the two options here. The first is delimited, and that essentially means that there's a certain character that separates each field or different attribute that you have. And then the other option there would be the fixed width. And if you were to choose that, that allows you to kind of use arrows to break out the information based strictly on the number of characters. So this would be used if there weren't any what is known as the delimiters, which would be those commas, dashes, any characters like that. So sometimes I've even seen reports, unfortunately, in such a messy format that you end up having to use this function twice and use both the delimited and the fixed width type. And I'll touch briefly on that a little later, but for our example, we made the export fairly clean, and we'll go through the delimited option. And that's because each attribute in the data is separated by a comma. So after you select your file type, again, for our example being the delimited option, you will move to the step 2 of the function. And this allows you to choose the specific delimiter that is separating your information. So there are some pre-populated options that you can see, the tab, semicolon, comma, and space. There's also an option for other, and then you can add in any specific character that you would want to there to base it off of if it's not listed. So a lot of times with that, I'll use a dash if I'm working with account numbers, or even an @ sign if you're looking to split like a user and domain name and an email address. Again, for our example, the delimiter is commas. So once you click the comma, you'll see in the data preview box here that all of the data is now separated everywhere that there was a comma in that initial column. All right, and then the last step here in this function then lets you do a few different things. So first, you can format the data in each of the different columns. And you'll see here that general for that means any numeric values are automatically converted to numbers, date values to dates, and then anything else would just go to text. General is typically what I would use, but as you can see too, there's the option to just select text, or you can order the date if that's one of your columns. So the drop down there, you can do month, day, year, day, month, year, etc. There's also a new and kind of nice option in Excel that allows you to skip or delete a column entirely if it's not needed. So this is especially helpful if you don't have a common delimiter through all of the data and some of the text is still lumped together. So for example, say there was in our original data, say there was no comma between the state and zip code, but you really didn't need that information broken apart for how you were using the report. So by still previously selecting the comma delimiter, the state and zip would still be together in one column, but could be removed entirely by this option of do not import. And there, on the other hand, if that happens, and like I mentioned earlier, you still could keep this information combined and then perform another text to column function using a fixed width option, or there are some other formula tricks in Excel that could break that out. And the last piece of this step is to determine the destination cell. So it will automatically go to the first cell highlighted. So if you wanted to keep your original data intact, you just need to choose a different destination cell there. And then once you have gone through all of those steps, your data should come out as shown on this slide with each attribute in a different column. This can now, as you can see, can be more easily formatted, sorted, and filtered, which we'll go over how useful that is in the next sections. All right, so we threw in another little joke here. This isn't an actual picture from anyone in our office, but I'd be lying if I said I haven't been or wanted to be in the same position in my beginner days of Excel. So hopefully that's not the case for you all, and especially so after maybe sitting through this course with us today. All right, so now that Bill had gone over the benefits of a flat file and I've reviewed ways to kind of separate your data into different columns, I'm going to dig a little deeper into the filter function. Now, this really only works if you do have that flat file and the information that you are looking to filter is in separate columns. So those are definitely the more difficult steps in the filter data functionality. So hopefully what we just covered will kind of help you get everything in the right format. And then when you are ready to start filtering and sorting your information, you'll just want to start by selecting the header row, and that shows the descriptions of the information you'd like to filter. You can either just click on the row, which would typically be row 1, or you can manually highlight the cells with the information. And after that's highlighted, you'd want to go to the data tab again on your taskbar and then click on the little funnel looking icon there called filter. Once this is selected, you'll see in our example there that each of the cells highlighted has a little drop down arrow on the right side. Okay, so once the filter function is selected, then there are several different options in the drop down for each column. So I'll go over a few of the most popular ones and then the ones I use the most. As you can see here from the screenshot of the drop down, the first two options are a sort function, either A to Z or Z to A. So this is obviously beneficial if the data that wasn't previously organized needs to be in alphabetical order. And this sort function also works on numerical values by either sorting the data from the smallest to largest or the largest to smallest value. Next is the option to sort and filter by color. So if you're like me and you just like to highlight everything in your spreadsheet in order to kind of color code by some sort of grouping, this definitely comes in handy when you only want to view those rows that are highlighted a certain color. Next, I'll go over then the text filter option. So as you can see, this includes various different text filters, which you can get to by hovering over the right arrow there. And then by clicking on any of these options, a custom toolbar will actually pop up in Excel, and then you're manually able to type in what you're filtering for. So as you can see, this gives you the options to filter your columns through like an equal or a does not equal function, begins and ends with function, and then the contains or does not contain function. Also within this toolbar, you have the option to filter numerical data by values greater or less than a certain amount. And clicking on any of these options, including the custom filter there, just takes you to the same toolbar. And again, you have the option to select which filter you'd like to use. Another great feature then of this filter function is just the standard search bar. So before you type anything into the search bar, each row within the column selected has a check mark next to it. So once you start typing in whatever you're searching for, it'll narrow down in real time only the data that contains the text or values that are being typed in that search bar. And then you can hit OK, and then only those rows will be visible in the spreadsheet. So what are the benefits of filtering your data? Well, as listed within, obviously the filter function easily allows you to extract certain data or search for specific transactions instead of scrolling through your whole report. It also allows you to drill down to relevant data by filtering by multiple criteria and even based on color, like we briefly went over. So a good example of when all of this would come in handy. So maybe if you're doing the analysis, say, of a significant customer usage over a period of time and you're wanting to review any fluctuations. So filters can be used to look only at certain customers billed through a specific time period, or you can even filter a range in the amount paid by a customer if you aren't necessarily looking for an exact value. So like I said, this really helps you to drill down to information in order to further analyze and look even for significant fluctuations. All right, and then finally, for my portion of this presentation, I'll just briefly discuss pivot tables, which is another good way of extracting information or isolating and summarizing large data sets. So I'll say pivot tables can sometimes be intimidating at first, but once you have used them and realize how easy and definitely quick it is to summarize very large data sets, you'll likely use them all the time. So I'll start, when would it be helpful to use a pivot table? So this function is extremely useful, again, when you're trying to narrow down or maybe even find errors in a data set. So similar to the filter function we just went over, you can isolate certain data through the pivot table function. For example, say again, you had a large data set of vendor transactions for the whole year. So by using a pivot table, you'd be able to summarize all of the transaction by just a certain vendor for whatever period of time and display it in a separate table format. And then another cool feature, even from that table, you can double click on a certain row. So in the example I'm saying here, a vendor, and it will create its own separate tab in Excel, pulling only those transactions or rows related to that vendor from your initial data set. And then so in order to create a pivot table, you first want to go to the Insert tab here on your toolbar, and then click on the first option under the tables grouping, which of course here is labeled pivot table. So by clicking on this, a command box will pop up and it'll give you the option to choose the data you'd like to analyze. So in order to select your range, then all you have to do is highlight it and it will automatically populate into the command box. You then have the option to choose where you want your pivot table to be displayed. So you can either do it on the same tab within the same worksheet, on a different tab within the same worksheet, or in a new worksheet altogether. And then once you have your range selected, you'll just hit OK. And then that creates your table and allows you to start building your report, which is shown on this tab here. So again, once this table has been inserted, you want to make sure that your mouse, like it says here, is in that blue outline box on the left. Otherwise, the field table options on the right won't display. So the field table over here, this allows you to select what fields you would like included in your pivot table. And this essentially includes options from each of the different columns in your data set from the other tab. So actually, if we could go back to the previous slide, and with the data that we selected for this example, let's say that the quick key here is actually a vendor number, and that's the information that we're wanting to summarize and isolate. So I realize here it's only showing the same number just in this screenshot, but let's say the whole data set includes every vendor number that your organization purchased from that year. And not only that, but each row within the spreadsheet is an individual transaction from that vendor, with the amount column being how much the individual transaction was. So say that if we go back to the next slide, then in the pivot table field box, then you could select the quick key as your row, and then say you want to summarize the total amount, which would also be an option in your field option in the pivot table. You want to summarize the total amount for each vendor. You could then pull that amount down in the field box and drag it down to the values area there. So I'll mention if the data in that column is in a text format, the value will automatically just populate as the count of the number of the times that vendor shows up in your original population. If what is included in the amount column is in a numeric format, so for example, the dollar amount of each purchase, the value will automatically show the total sum of those. You can also drill down further into the value field settings and summarize the data, say by average for that vendor, maximum, minimum, all of that. And then even further from there, you have the option to show the value as a calculation. So say you wanted to choose the amount paid for a certain vendor as a percentage of the grand total of all of the vendor payments, show running total, rank from largest to smallest, and other various calculations. It's very helpful, beneficial, and really helps you to analyze your data there. So just due to time limitations, I'm not going to go through every functionality of this feature, but I at least wanted to draw attention to how valuable that this can be in summarizing and organizing information, and highlight the fact that pivot table is definitely a beneficial tool to play with if you're not yet familiar with it. And it's one that I definitely use on a regular basis.
So next, I'm going to go through a feature that I really came to grow and love during the pandemic. It's duplicating a window, and this can be done in the Office suites, but also other programs such as Adobe. And really, what the benefit here of duplicating a window is really that you can see the same file in two separate windows, and you can compare information side by side. So for instance, since we're talking about Excel, you can compare information in one tab of your Excel workbook to another tab in this Excel workbook at the same time. So just as an example, here I got my employee list open, and you can see this slide here, or this workbook is -1, and over here this is -2. So you can make changes in either one of these versions of this open workbook, and it will save and act and update on the other side as well. Everything is still live. So to be able to duplicate a window, you really just have to go to the View tab here and then hit the New Window button, and it will create this separate instance of your open workbook. And like I said, this really has saved me a lot of paper in the process. And when you're working from home and maybe not have a printer, being able to compare things side by side like this is a really great function within Office. So again, this works in many different platforms. If you want to get your windows side by side like I had them there, you just hold down the window button, hit the left arrow. It will slide your active window to the left side of your screen, and then it will pull up, a pane that shows all your remaining windows that are open, and you can select from there what you want to display side by side if you're only working with one monitor. So I put this in here just to kind of remind everybody that, we might be talking about some functionalities that are new to you within Excel. So it's possible that when you go back, you're not going to remember exactly how to do everything that we're talking about. That's why it's important to have a Google search and type in the functionality either have a written instruction or even a video. Sometimes I like watching the videos and like pausing as I'm trying to build that formula for the first couple of times until I get familiar with it enough, to do it on my own. But you might fail a couple of times with some of these new features that you're trying out, but don't give up. There's help out there. You can reach out to myself or Taylor on some of these things as well. So we're just going to wrap up our Excel section just with some useful tools and functions within Excel that we thought might be helpful for everybody. So the first one is the idea of transposing data. So say you're starting to set up a spreadsheet and you put the months across the top as column headers in your spreadsheet, and then later on you're like, well, I only have like 4 columns or rows then beneath that. It would make sense for those to be my rows and my other data to be my columns. Well, if you go in and copy that information and go to paste special and transpose, it will flip or rotate that information from a row header to or a column header down into the rows. So it just takes and transposes that information. Another useful thing that we do a lot in auditing is the concatenate function. And that's just combining data in different cells into one cell. So Taylor talked about how to break that information apart when it's in one cell and you want it in multiple cells. This is how they kind of combine that information back together easily if you need it that way. So for example, if you're doing a mail merge and in Excel, you have the first name, middle initial, last name, all in different columns, and you want to put that data all together in one cell for your mail merge. You can use this concatenate function, and the formula is just right here. And each text 1, text 2, you can link to a cell, within your workbook. So maybe a little bit trickier though is if you're combining that stuff and the proper spacing doesn't happen, you can always add another comma in between and put open quote, space, end quote to get that additional spacing that you need. So you might have to adjust your formula for some spacing, but other than that, it works great. In your formulas themselves, you can kind of cheat and abbreviate some of the concatenate function by just adding an and symbol, and that's useful in some formulas as well. So if you are working in a workbook and maybe you're not familiar with the workbook or you've got it from someone else and you don't know where all the formulas are within that workbook and something might not be working and it's referencing something and you might need to tweak something, this is a useful function in Excel that would change all the values that you're displaying to the actual displaying the formula. So you can quickly identify where the formulas within your spreadsheet are and toggle back and forth by just hitting the control and open parent key. And then on this page, the last bullet point is how to create a text box. So you have a data set that you may want to leave a note about something important, but you don't want to put it off to the side where it might get missed, but you don't want to interrupt the flatness of your file. As we talked, that's very important. So you don't want to put it right in the middle of the information. You can actually put a text box over top of the information and leave the note in a text box that won't interrupt your data. So in order to do that, you just go into the Insert tab, Text, and Text Box. So I often find having information within a cell on multiple lines sometimes useful. Say you have a cell that has an address on it, but to display properly for what you want to print off or do within that, you want it on 2 separate lines. You can use the Alt-Enter after that, and it will actually put a line break within a cell and allow you to type information below information already there. The next one, I'm not sure how well this works, but if it ever just works once for you, it might be worth mentioning here. But if you ever working on an unsaved workbook and it Excel crashes or something happens with your computer, try going into the File tab, open recent workbooks and recover unsaved workbooks and check to see if your unsaved work's in there before going back and trying to do it from scratch. So the next thing is really important, a table from the website. If you work with investments or other things and you need fair market values for your investments, or you're tracking things such as that are listed on the website, you can go out and really pull all that data that's listed in a table on a website into Excel and utilize it within that very easily. So, from the data tab, you go to get and transform data, and from web, and then you can basically select the information from there that you want to pull into Excel. And then the last thing here is really analyzing components of a formula. Really what this does is really traces through every cell that's connected to that formula, and it will kind of draw lines to show what all is being connected within that formula. So within there, that's sometimes helpful to fix a bad formula, or if something's not working out the way that you anticipated it to. So if you go into the formulas tab, formula auditing, you go to trace precedents and help get you those connections. Lastly, I just want to go over a useful tool. We talked about selecting data. What ASAP Utilities is a group of macros that someone developed to help save time within Excel. So these macros are stored within these shortcuts within this ribbon. And underneath each of these options are multiple ways to select information or clean up text. So there's many different things within there that are very helpful. When you are cleaning up data on a regular basis, you want to have some tools in hand to assist in that. And this is a very useful tool. So it's very inexpensive. It costs about $50, but if you do clean up data, I would encourage you. You can download a free trial for like 90 days of ASAP Utilities, and it might be a good thing just to play around with either at work or at home and see how it can benefit your day. So hopefully now maybe you would not hate Excel as much and have that statement in an interview. Hopefully you can utilize Excel to make your day more efficient and not make it worse. So with that, I'm going to ask if there's any questions or comments on this section. If not, we'll turn it back over to Christina.